All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. This will be on the DJI Matrice series smart features. So it'll be for the M300 RTK as well as the M30 and M30T. Just kind of a quick intro here. My name is Ryan Carter and I have been with Multicopter since 2020. I am the Enterprise Account Manager for the West for Public Safety and Inspection. My colleague Greg King, he couldn't join us today. He is actually dealing with a little bit of an illness, but he is our Enterprise Account Manager for the East Side for Public Safety and Inspection. So we'll have our contact information listed at the end. If you do have any questions or need any quotes or any general questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. Kind of a little intro about Multicopter Warehouse here. It was founded in 2014 and we are a tier 1 DJI dealer. We also deal the Autel Robotics, the Teledyne FLIR products, and we have an enterprise division for public safety and inspection as well as mapping and survey specialist. On top of that, we are an authorized DJI service center, so you can always send in your drones to us to be repaired. If you don't have the DJI care, it's typically what you'll do is send it in to us. If you do have DJI care, you get a replacement. So kind of an outline of the webinar today. We're going to first start off by looking at the two systems, the M30 and the M30T, as well as the DJI Matrice 300 RTK. Now, a lot of these smart features are pretty specific to the ZenMuse H20 series, so I'll go ahead and point that out along the way. And then we'll kind of get into the smart features, featuring the mission planning with the Pilot 2 app, the smart pin and track, the safety and reliability, and the advanced dual control on each of these systems. So to start it off, we have the DJI M30 and M30T. So this was released a few months ago by DJI, and it does have a built-in payload. So either the 30 or the 30T is what you're going to get. The 30T is going to add the thermal camera on there, whereas the 30 will just have the 20 times optical zoom, the wide angle camera, and the laser rangefinder. With the T, the thermal camera you get is a radiometric 640 by 512. This thing does have a flight time of 41 minutes with an IP rating of 55. Now that IP rating is telling us that we are able to fly this in a downpour of rain, and we were able to actually test this in-house the past few weeks when we've starting to get some rain here in Colorado, and it did a great job flying in just an absolute downpour of rain. We have a video if you do want to see it on our Instagram page. But this system will be the highest weather rating on any of the DJI drones that we sell. And then we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but it does have the multiple pilot modes, the 360 obstacle avoidance, and it comes included with the DJI RC Plus, which is a beautiful 8-inch display with the high brightness on there as well. Now going over to the Matrice 300, this one does not include a payload, and you would be purchasing those separately, but you can do an assortment of payloads. So it is compatible with the ZenMuse H20 series, the ZenMuse P1, L1, the XT2, the Z30, and the FLIR TZ20R is another one that we carry for this aircraft. Now this one will have a max flight time around 55 minutes. That's going to be with no payload. With the single payload, we're looking around 40 to 45 minutes, depending on the weight on that payload. The IP rating on this isn't quite as high as the M30 or M30T, although it can handle rain or snow. It's just not going to be advised to fly this when it is a downpour or torrential rain. And then just like the M30 and M30T, it does have those multiple pilot modes and the 360 obstacle avoidance. Now, giving you an outline on the H20 series, there's 3 different models for this. So there's the ZenMuse H20, there's the ZenMuse H20T, and ZenMuse H20N. So the big difference between these 3 payloads is that the H20 is not going to have any thermal. It's going to have a 23 times optical zoom, 12 megapixel wide angle camera, and then the laser rangefinder. When you do get to the H20T, it's going to have those same 3 cameras on top, or I'm sorry, same 2 cameras plus the laser rangefinder and the 640 by 512 thermal camera. When we get to that H20N, this one's going to be designed specifically for nighttime operations. So the thermal camera, the 2 visible cameras, the wide angle and the zoom, will both be starlight sensors. So with the starlight sensor, it is going to be lower megapixels, but each pixel itself is larger. So what this allows you to do is be able to get a good visible image with about a half a moon of light outside. Whereas with the H20 and H20T, it will not yield you a very good visible image at night. The thermal camera will obviously work just fine at night. But if you were intending on using this more for both day and nighttime operations, I would recommend the H20 or H20T because of the fact that it'll give you a much better image during the day. Now with that H20N, on top of having the starlight sensors, it also adds an additional thermal camera that's at an 8 times telephoto zoom. So it doesn't give you an optical zoom option, but it does give you the ability to change from the wider thermal to the zoom thermal, giving you a higher resolution thermal image from a further distance away. Now the Pilot 2 app is what's going to be used for both these drones, the M30T and M300 RTK. And within that app, you have 2 options when you first enter in, and that's going to be either going into the manual flight by entering the camera or by setting a flight route. The 4 different flight routes that we're going to be going over is going to be waypoint, mapping, oblique, and linear. So to start it off, this is going to be the page that you'll see when you select a flight route. You have 2 options. You're able to either create a route or import a KMZ file or KML file through Google Maps to be able to set the flight area. And that's pretty easy to do. If you did want more information on how to do the KML import, please reach out. We can give you a step-by-step tutorial on exactly how to do that. But those are going to be the 2 ways of setting the flight area when doing a mission flight. Now, the first one's going to be mapping. Typically, the mapping feature is going to be used for 2D maps and models. And what you will do with this is once you enter into the create a route, you're going to tap on the screen exactly where you want to set that flight area. And within that, it's going to then ask you to set your recommended settings with overlap, your flight height, and then selecting which type of camera that you're using. Now, with the H20 series, they're not necessarily designed for mapping. Now, I know we deal with a lot of public safety and inspection people that don't tend to do mapping on a regular basis, but here and there they might be wanting to execute a mapping mission where the wide camera on the H20 is going to give you the best overall results. And then it's recommended you fly at a height of around 150 to 200 feet when collecting that data. The oblique photos are intended for 3D maps and models where the camera is actually going to be at an angle to be able to see sides of buildings, sides of structures, and so on. It's going to be very similar to the same process that we do with mapping, where we're still going to set the flight area, we're going to set the overlap, we're going to set the height. The only thing that's going to be different is going to be the fact that the camera will be angled, and the flight line, you will likely need to be doing a double pass rather than a single pass on the flight area. And if you guys have any questions while I go through this, please use the chat box or question box to pop them in. I'll definitely answer them all at the end, but I'll try and answer them along the way if you have anything. Now, getting into the linear flight mission, this is going to be where it's essentially following one route. A good case for this would be for power line inspections, where you're not really doing a large area, but more so along singular line. So again, going to be very similar to setting the mission with mapping or oblique. Instead, with this, you're just going to set your flight path, and then you'd be able to collect overlapping images and set how much distance out from that line you want it to go. So if you do need it to go 100, 200 feet outside of where that flight line is, that's all going to be customizable through the DJI Pilot app. And then getting into waypoints. Now, waypoints are going to be one of the more complex ones to use. There's going to be a few different ways to go about it, where we can either set the waypoints within the app itself by tapping on the map, selecting the height, selecting the tasks that you'd like to do at each stop. And so that's going to be the set waypoints. And under set waypoints, you'll be able to select as many waypoints as you'd like. And within each waypoint, you can tell it exactly what you'd like it to do, whether you'd like it to hover at each stop, whether you'd like it to take a photo at each stop, whether you'd like it to just use that as the flight route and continue on. A few case scenarios for this would be inspection or routine monitoring for public safety for high populated areas where you wanted to kind of do a loop around maybe a an event of some sort where you could set the flight path to be not over people, but still be able to check on different areas where people might be gathered. This is a good flight mode for that. For the live mission recording, this is going to be where the AI spot check comes into play. Now, this is a mode that was actually recently added on to the M30 and M30T, whereas before it was only compatible with the M300 and H20 series. But with the AI spot check, it's going to automate routine inspections for those of you using it for inspection. So the way that you're going to go about setting up this mission is by actually starting the live mission recording. You're going to fly to each spot. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get to that spot and set up each shot. All the drone cares about is that final shot. So it's going to record the position, the altitude, the camera pitch, and the camera angle to try and mimic exactly what you're shooting. Now, with this AI spot check, what it's going to allow you to do is actually refine the area that of interest after you've taken these photos. So once you launch, you get to spot 1, you take your photo, you get to spot 2, take your photo, so on and so forth. Then once you finish that mission, you're going to be able to go through each of those photos and highlight the exact area within that photo that you would like that you want to be the area of interest. So that way, when it re-executes that mission, it's going to be able to try and find that exact item or landmark that you've selected to be able to snap a photo of that and go on to the next spot. Now, we did some testing with this in the past few weeks, and we've noticed that when you do have the DRTK2 base station, a part of that sequence with the drone and remote, then the accuracy on those photos and exactly what it's shooting is going to be much better than what we see without the DRTK2 base station. Now, that's not to say that it has to be done with the base station, because we found it was still very useful without a base station. But in terms of the if you are kind of pushing the max range on that zoom, the further zoom you get in when you take those photos, the harder it's going to be to match up exactly what it's looking at when in this mode. Whereas with the DRTK2 base station, when you introduce that into the mix, then it does get a lot more accurate data when executing the AI spot check. Now, one of the most popular ones that we see is the smart pin and track. Now, with the pinpoint, what that's going to be using is the laser rangefinder on the drone to be able to quickly tap and select a point of interest to then be able to get that location data to teams on the ground. So in a public safety setting, how this would be used would be if you were using the thermal camera to pick up a heat signature of a person, and as you can kind of see there in the photo, that they're able to identify the person, and then using the rangefinder actually mark that point where they're going to see the latitude, longitude, location of where that is. Now, you can also label that person, or if it was being used in an inspection setting and you noticed a fault at one place within your flight, then you're able to quickly identify it and mark it, so that way you can go back to it and try and figure out exactly what's going on. So using that laser rangefinder, it is going to give you the ability to mark the latitude, longitude of that point, and it's also going to give you the real-time reading of how far away that point is from the drone, and it's also going to give you the above sea level altitude. So you'll get all that information from that pinpoint feature. Now, I do have a question here asking if that will work with the H20T. Everything that I've talked about so far does work with the H20T and M30T. These are features that are built into the Pilot app, which will work with both systems. So, yep, absolutely. And then for the smart track, now this is primarily used in a public safety scenario. Once you enable that, so if you look at the picture there at the top left, right below the where you see in-flight GPS, you see a little circle with a dot in it. When that is turned on, what that's going to do is it's going to put these circles on the screen around anything that it thinks you might want to track. So cars, bikes, people, anything like that, it's going to give you the option to quick select that subject. Now, if you don't have that circle with a dot turned on, how you can get into this is by drawing a square from corner to corner around the subject, and it's going to go into the tracking mode. Now, it's similar if you have any consumer drones. This is how you do the active track mode as well. By going corner to corner around the subject, it highlights it in a green box and will start the follow. Now, unlike the consumer active track modes, the smart track is not going to autonomously fly the drone. So this is where you come into play of getting the drone in a good position to be able to follow that subject just by yawing on its axis and by the camera gimbal moving and following and utilizing the zoom on that to keep it in frame. Now that's not to say that you can't manually operate the drone to be able to get into better position and to follow a subject, but yeah, it's going to make it very easy to select them when you have that mode turned on, and if you get to a good altitude where things aren't going to get in between you and your subject. Now, this does have predictive tracking, so you will notice that if you have the smart track mode enabled and you have a subject that you're following, then what it's going to do is it's going to try and find it. If it does lose it behind a tree, a building, it's going to predict where it might come out of, and most of the time it does a very good job of picking back up the subject and resuming the mission. But there are instances where, you know, if there's too many cars, too many people, that if it does go behind a building or an obstacle of some sort, then what it's going to do is it sometimes will snap onto a different subject. So you just want to make sure you're monitoring the screen to ensure that you have the subject that you're looking for when you're using this feature. Now, the safety and reliability on these systems is something that we definitely want to talk about. The M300 and M30T both are equipped with 6 directional obstacle avoidance sensors, so that will be able to pick up any obstacles that are anything but power lines. Essentially, power lines are one of the biggest threats to the obstacle sensing system, since they're so thin and can sneak up on them without recognizing it. Now, with the M300, with that, they've come out with a CSM radar, a circular scanning radar that will pick up stuff at the centimeter, millimeter level when flying. So that's definitely something I highly recommend for that system, especially if you're flying it in an area that might have power lines, or even when it turns fall time and there's trees with you know, branches that have little leaves on it and not very much contrast. It's not very good at picking up those, but for the most part, this obstacle avoidance system will pick up 95% of the obstacles that you will encounter. It has 2 visible and 2 IR sensors in each direction. So that's kind of a nice feature. The health management system is something that they've started to include with these 2 systems as well. You'll find in the Pilot 2 app, it's going to be one of the things that pops up before you actually enter into the camera, and that's going to be a systems check for essentially all the different propulsion, batteries, the avionics. It's going to throw you a red flag if there's something that's not seeming to be connected up just right. The smart return to home mode is a feature that's built into essentially all the DJI drones, but a little bit more advanced with the enterprise drones, where it's going to return to home if it ever loses connection from the remote controller. It's going to return to home if it ever gets too low on battery where it only has enough to return to home. And then it'll return to home if you enable a return to home mode. Now, I always make a point of telling people to make sure that they set their return to home altitude per flight. So you definitely want to make sure that you set that higher than any obstacle in the area. Now, with this having so many obstacle avoidance sensors on it, it will likely still make it back if you set that too low and it needs to go around a building or so on and so forth. But you always want to make sure and give the drone as much information as possible to be able to return to home safely. Another thing that they've started to include in both enterprise and consumer drones is the ADS-B. So the ADS-B gives you good situational awareness when you are flying of the other air traffic in the area. And so one question we get a lot is, do they can they see exactly where you are, like you can see where they are? And that's going to be no. They are not able to see you. You can only see them. So if a plane is approaching, you will be able to see their altitude in relation to you, as well as their general location in relation to you. So us being a store right next to a regional airport here, Centennial Airport, we deal with this quite a bit, and it's a feature we actually quite enjoy because it warns us when we are getting a little too close to another aircraft. Now the aeroscope is going to be something that DJI, it's a software DJI has to be able to detect where the drones are, where your fleet is, if there's any other drones in your area, this will be compatible with that as well. Now the dual control, as we kind of mentioned a little earlier, both of these aircrafts will have the multiple operator modes. So the RC Pro Plus there on the right side is for the M30. The DJI Smart Controller or the Enterprise Smart Controller is there on the left. Now, one question we get quite a bit is when will the RC Pro be compatible with the Matrice 300? That is still up in the air at this time. We do not know exactly when. I'm personally kind of surprised it hasn't already happened, but stay tuned on that in terms of being able to use that RC Pro Plus for your Matrice 300. But so right now, if you did have an M300, you would be wanting to get an additional DJI Enterprise Smart Controller, and if you had an M30, you'd want to do the RC Pro Plus extra smart controller. And within that mode, you can do 3 different options. You have the coach mode, where you have one controller being almost the master for both the aircraft and the gimbal, and the secondary remote being able to fly when enabled through the primary remote. And then there's the second one, which is going to be aircraft gimbal operator. So one person controlling the aircraft, one person controlling the gimbal, and then a complete passover mode. So if you did have a situation where the drone gets beyond visual line of sight and you had a secondary passenger set up down the road, you'd be able to give them full control of the drone. Now with the new DJI RC Pro Plus, they made it really nice and easy to figure out who has control of the drone, who has control of the camera gimbal. There is a little button there. If you look at the remote, it's going to be right next or right on top of the left joystick. There's a tiny button that lights up either red or green based on who has control of the aircraft. So that is also the button you press to take over the control of the aircraft if it's not locked in coach mode. All right, so that's what we have here. I know we do have some questions, and so we'll get to these here. So let's see. Exporting the pins you drop for the smart pin, you can export those pins. You know, the exact workflow on how to do it, I can't remember off the top of my head. If you do want to send me an email about that, I can definitely follow up with you and get you the workflow for exporting those pins from the remote off, so that way you can get them to teams on the ground to go and actually investigate the pins that you dropped. But short answer, yes. Let's see here. The ADS-B will work with military aircraft, yeah, it'll show you the position of that aircraft. Like I said, it's only going to be within a certain radius. I would say a mile and a half or so that it's going to actually give you that location data, and then it's going to go off your map. So it's not something you can really customize and search the area for. It's more so going to be just to give you a situational awareness in real time when they're getting too close. So I can't remember the exact radius of how far the ADS-B is going to extend from the drone. But if I had to guess, I'm going to say about a mile, mile and a half is when it starts to warn you. And then it populates in the map as well to show you actually where in relation to them that they are. Let's see. And then just to reiterate, yes, so for the AI spot check, that is going to be something that is compatible with the H20 series on the M300. So H20, H20T, H20N, as well as the M30 and M30T. Yep. Yeah, the H20N, I definitely would not recommend for the AI spot check. It's capable of doing it, but that one is really geared specifically for public safety use and nighttime use. Unless you're in a situation where you are only flying inspections at night, which I don't see happening, then H20T or H20N are going to be the best option for that. I think that's all the questions. Again, if you guys have any other questions or any questions about the webinar or any questions in general, please feel free to reach out to us here at our Multicopter emails. See them listed for me and Greg. Feel free to stop by too. If you guys ever wanted to swing by the store and see these systems in action, we are always able to set up a demo here in our store in Centennial. But other than that, I appreciate you guys all joining us. Sorry it was a short day for us today, and hopefully we'll have Greg back for us next time. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend.